You talk about that cancelled one was the black sun symbol that you posted. Do you remember reason why you posted it at the time, or did you understand it?
I promise you and promise everybody, I had no idea there was a black sun. I didn't even notice it when I shared it. And it's one of those things that if I had have known it, I definitely would have shared it. Even though when COVID came along, it definitely stank. Like an off fish in a bin that's been out in the sun for too long. I remember putting out memes and posts basically just saying this is a hoax, this is a scam. Apart from the dietary guidelines, that's the other biggest scam that's ever been perpetrated on the Western population. There was not one health official talking about how to be healthy. And most of the health officials do not look healthy themselves. But there were so many red flags and holes in the story that
Chef Pete Evans is an internationally acclaimed culinary innovator, renowned for transforming food into a way of life. From his award-winning restaurants to star turns on My Kitchen Rules, his journey blends passion with innovation. A celebrated author and health ambassador, Chef Pete redefines nutrition through the power of food.
I've been in that point in my life where I don't really give a what anybody thinks about me. I will share recipes on my Instagram page every day. If you choose to hold my hand on that journey or be a part of that community, sweet. If you don't, sweet. I'm not going to dislike you because you don't want to eat that type of food. I'm not going to dislike you because you like Biden or Harris or one of the Australian politicians. I don't follow Australian politics at all. I find it childish. Yeah. It's give us some serious intellectual, intelligent people on stage with charisma that are authentic. Then I might take interest. It looks like kindergarten compared to most of the political systems in the world. America seems like maybe high school. Perhaps we'll get to that point in the future where we don't need these politicians and governments as much as we believe we currently do at the moment, and they will be less important as the years go on.
You talk about missing the disinformation stuff. You were deplatformed by Meta, weren't you? And then also fined by the TGA $80,000. But do you remember what those breaches were for, and how do they stack up now in hindsight if they were looking at it?
Yeah.
Welcome to The Ballsy Show, where I dive into tough conversations about controversial topics that no one else wants to talk about. I chat to guests with a unique perspective who aren't afraid to speak their truths and want to explore ideas that matter. Joining me today is a man who polarises opinion, outspoken, charismatic celebrity chef, Pete Evans. Pete Evans, thanks for your time.
Thanks, mate. Great to see you, and thanks for inviting me on, and g'day, everyone.
Now, your childhood, mate, what was it like?
It was, everyone's childhood is pretty relative to them, you know. They often talk about childhood trauma being something that we need to resolve and let go of and work through and all of this. So, you know, I reckon I had a pretty ace childhood. You know, there are some traumatic things that happened in there, you know, parents separating, injuries, these types of things, and a lot of moving around as a youngster. But I'm grateful for all the experience that I've accumulated in this lifetime. And one of the great things is I learned how to surf, which I'm very grateful to my brother for teaching me that and encouraging me. I was a late bloomer. I only started when I was 14, and I was already living on the Gold Coast from the age of 7. So it took me quite some time to get comfortable to face the fear of stepping into the ocean. And the ocean's been one of my greatest teachers ever since. And 51 years of age now. And I still feel the terminology for a young surfer is a grommet here in Australia, and I still have that frothing grommet energy, and I'm out there most days. And so childhood was fun, learning to surf, skateboard, wakeboard, snow ski, play tennis, all of these things. And and any of those sort of little splinters of trauma have been, I believe, well and truly taken out so they don't fester into my old age, as they can do for a lot of people.
You mentioned divorce. Like I've been through one personally, and my kids have gone through that journey, which can be difficult. What advice would you hand on to kids, or was your advice just to push through and live your life?
My advice to kids if they're going through any traumatic experience, wow, that's a huge question, mate. that's a big one, you know, because everybody's journey is so unique and so different, and obviously the scars that we gather through these traumatic experiences, we really don't know how they're going to play out and what benefit and that might sound like a strange word, but we can never underestimate the ripple effects of these lessons that we're invited to explore on this adventure of life. So, what advice would I give? The advice I would give is to be curious as to why you got to experience what you have experienced or are experiencing. Curiosity, I think, is the key for self-growth, self-development, self-understanding, self-awareness. So being curious as to why these things happened instead of being the victim and blaming others for these circumstances. I know it's a big pill to swallow, and it's a very difficult one sometimes for people to swallow, to not blame others, but just to contemplate why this developed for you to experience in your existence. What benefits can you get from this? And some of the more straightforward ones is, if it has been traumatic, say mum and dad have been arguing or fighting, it might give you the impetus to, when you are going through a relationship of your own, to be able to decide and choose to follow a different path in relation to these challenges that we might find. So if you witnessed your parents fighting or being abusive physically or emotionally, and that really rocked your world, the invitation then is to perhaps not repeat the same patterns, because that's one of the traps that we fall into as human beings, is repeating the patterns of our parents or our guardians or society, and then having free will to look at these experiences when they come and choose a different path, if you like. One of the keys, I believe, as human beings, is to identify what our patterns are and our beliefs are that we've accumulated, again, through our environment, whether it be our parents' beliefs or our cultural beliefs or our siblings' beliefs, or whatever these belief patterns are, to analyze them and decide whether they benefit us or whether we're just playing out the same program that feels normal for us, and you can infer this in so many different ways. Why is it that somebody that's in an abusive relationship goes from one to the other or stays in it? There are so many examples of why people stay in these patterns, even though they are being hurt in these choices that they make, because the fear of being alone might be greater than the fear of, or the uncomfortableness of staying in a relationship, So understanding where our fears are, or where our perceived, and I don't like to use the word weaknesses, but where these self-limiting belief patterns are in us, identify them, understand potentially where they have come from. And you can go about that through many different ways. It can be meditation, contemplation, working with trained professionals in this space, psychedelic exploration. There's a plethora of different ways in which we can get to the root cause, or understanding our root patterns that define us, and then getting to a state of neutrality. So when these occurrences give us another opportunity to either go back into that learned pattern or behavioral patterned response, for us to choose a different path. And I know that might sound airy-fairy and wishy-washy and a little bit for fucking esoteric, but obviously there's great benefit to be had by exploring this and being curious about, who am I? It's the ultimate question. Who am I? What am I here?
I think
what's the point of all of this?
Well, it's taken, as you say, it's 51 years, and I'm 46 years of trying to work out what I'm doing here, if you know what I mean. So it probably makes a bit of sense that way. But I'm really interested in your cooking journey. What made Pete Evans become a cook? Was it the excitement of the kitchen? It was the end up product? It was the manicness of everything going, or creating a cool thing, and as the end, you end up having Hugo's in Bondi, the celebrity place where Oprah once dined and all that. But what was the thing that got you started with the cooking?
It was, I started work when I was 13 up on the Gold Coast. I worked in a mate's pie shop or bakery. My best mate at the time, his family owned, and I stepped into that. And then at the age of 14, I stepped into a role at McDonald's, not front of house. I tried that. I didn't like that, serving customers. Tried out the back, flipping burgers and cooking fries. And that suited me, suited my personality a lot better. And then I did that for a year, then went to Sizzler, which was right next door at Mermaid Beach on the Gold Coast. It was, I think, it was the first Sizzler in Australia, and worked there for 2 years while I was at high school. And I enjoyed the process. I have quite an analytical mind. I'm very, very, very switched on into. I love systems and organization. And at school, my favorite subject was mathematics. I like things that make sense. And cooking seemed to be this thing that made a lot of sense. A list of ingredients cooked in a certain method for a desired outcome, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And you could always try to fine tune that and perfect it, which I also love. My personality loves that fine tuning, striving for perfection. And at the same time, while I was at school, as I said, mathematics, so I did advanced mathematics at high school, mathematics 1 and 2, I think it was called at the time. I don't even remember, but all the other subjects didn't really resonate with me at all. And when it was time to, when we're 16, 17, and we've got this pressure of what are you going to do with your life? The thought of going to university, even though I love mathematics, and if I was to go to university, I would have gone into accounting, because again, that made a lot of sense to me, and I enjoyed mathematics and finding truth, I guess you could say. But the idea of sitting in a classroom longer than I already had for 12 years of my life at school just seemed like complete and utter torture, and something that I just, I didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
I knew at that point in time, I was like, fuck, I do not want to sit in the classroom anymore, because I felt like 95% of the time at school was just a waste, definitely a waste, especially in the high school years. I understand it for primary school, learning how to read, write, and add up. I think, there's something valid about that, so you can converse in this world and understand this world a little bit. But I would say that most of the education system is pretty messed up and a waste of time for most people. So when I was deciding what I wanted to do, I looked at all the career paths that were available to me, and I looked at mechanic, builder, butcher, hairdresser, plumber, chef, and the chef option ticked more boxes than any of the others did. And one of the main ones was just learning a life skill that I knew that I would be able to carry on for the rest of my life, which was the simple act or craft of being able to cook for myself. And eventually, if I had a family, I would be able to cook for them. So that was the impetus or the catalyst to going on to the cooking journey. And did an apprenticeship up on the Gold Coast, and in Victoria. I finished it, and it was a brutal decision. I'll just tell you that much. At the time, it was a brutal industry, and it potentially still is. But back in the day, we're going back 35 years. It was tough. Like many industries can be, but the cooking industry was by far one of the toughest adventures I've ever undertaken. And not many people that start an apprenticeship finish it, simply for that reason. It's just a very tough environment. And I was a very shy, weak, non-masculine type of person coming out of high school. And I'm very grateful for putting myself into that position, because I had to become a man very, very, very rapidly. Otherwise, I wouldn't survive. And so I definitely have that to be grateful for, to be able to know how hard I could push myself physically, mentally, and emotionally through that period of becoming a chef, and then the subsequent years of owning restaurants and then leading teams in, as you said, award-winning restaurants. It definitely was a tough training ground that I'm very grateful for, which has led me to be able to do the things that I do today with no fear anymore about anything that I do.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful position to be in. You're saying that obviously Hugo's is dominating, things are going really well. Then I assume Channel 7 network comes knocking. My Kitchen Rules, 20 years, ratings juggernaut, 2 million people a week. Me, who used to work at 9, all I kept hearing about is bloody MKR, costs our ratings, can't buy any advertiser buyers because it's going that way. How was that first starting out, and was it exciting? I assume because the show's so successful, you're the golden child of the network. And how difficult was it to stay grounded in that situation?
Yeah, well, Channel 7 came along about 10 years after my introduction into the celebrity chef world of being in front of a camera. And my second greatest fear, or one of my greatest fears, definitely was being seen and being heard and having a camera on me, or public speaking. That was, yeah, to this day, one of my greatest fears. So it was actually Foxtel that came along and knocked on the door first, 10 years prior to hosting My Kitchen Rules. And the catalyst for the fascination over food stemmed from Jamie Oliver and his show, The Naked Chef, that had first appeared on, I think it was BBC over in the United Kingdom. And because it took off in such a way, Australia was very quick to emulate this newfound popularity of cooking for people at home. And so Foxtel had one of its major channels on Foxtel was called the Lifestyle Channel. So they asked me to do an audition. Bill Granger was the original person that was slated to do this TV series, and he pulled out for his own personal reasons. And so they were in a hurry, because they'd already got their landscape gardener, they had their interior designer / stylist, and they needed the cook or the chef to come on board very quickly, because they were starting to shoot in about a month's time. And because Bill had pulled the pin, they were frantic to find somebody to replace him. And I said no originally. I was like, fuck, that's the worst possible thought I could ever have is hosting a TV show, like that. No, I don't want to do that. So I said no. And then a week later, they called me back and said, look, we'd really, really want you to audition, because the food that you're doing in your restaurant is the type of food that we would like to be showcasing on this show called Home. And I knew at the time that if somebody asked you to do something after you've said no, that there's definitely a very big invitation for oneself for personal growth to go down that path, especially if there's such resistance from the individual to do it. So I gathered up the courage to do the audition, and then I got the job, which was sort of terrifying as well as exhilarating at the same time. Like I won the audition, but at the same time, fuck, I got to go and now perform in front of a camera. So I went on that journey, and I hosted that show for about 6 years. And then that finished. I did another show with my dear friend Udo, which was called Fish, where we cooked and fished and surfed around the country. And that was before, I think, Surfing the Menu came out. And that was a great show. Like, cooking and fishing with my best mate and traveling Australia. Like, if there's the ultimate TV show that I would again love to host, that would be it. Cooking, traveling, fishing, surfing. Like, how cool. And so I got to do that. Then I didn't get that renewed for the second time. And then I got offered to work with Channel 9 on a daily cooking show called Fresh, which was there were 200 episodes they filmed a year. So I was going into the big leagues then, onto commercial television. So I got that job. I did that for 2 years, and then they pulled the pin on that show, Channel 9 did, just before MasterChef took off for Channel 10. And MasterChef just became this juggernaut, as you know. And then within 6 months, I think it was, Channel 7 wanted to do another show that I guess rivaled MasterChef, and they created My Kitchen Rules. And I got the call up to do that, got the job, and then hosted that for 11 years. So I was already sort of, I already had 450 episodes under my belt. So going into My Kitchen Rules, I felt like I had earned my stripes, so to speak, with the time that I'd spent in front of a camera. Every episode was half an hour. So you got to think I'd spent over 200 hours being filmed in front of a camera. So I'd confronted my my fears of being seen and being heard, and I started doing stand-up cooking demonstrations in front of the general public as well. So I confronted those fears and got to a point of neutrality where I could stand in front of 1,000 people, or be seen by 1 million people, or 2 million people, or 4 million people on television, and not be frightened in the slightest, and really couldn't give a fuck what anyone thought of me. It's cool.
It's a good
nice place to get to.
An absolutely good place to be. But obviously that comes to an end at some stage. But did you sense early on that Pete, who wanted to talk about what he wanted to talk about and wanted to be open and honest and transparent in his life, probably didn't align with the way the networks roll? And did you have to second guess or have those conversations with yourself about stepping out into your so-called truth?
No, it was quite an organic process, actually, because when I was with My Kitchen Rules, I had already released 5 or 6 cookbooks. The first one was called Fish, because I have a love with the Australian ocean and waterways. So I created this beautiful cookbook, which was, very well received, just highlighting just the amazing variety of seafood that we have in Australian waters. And subsequent books was just home cooking, entertaining. I did a barbecue book. I did a pizza book, because we had a pizza restaurant, or an Italian restaurant at the time. I did a fine dining book. I did a catering sort of function, finger food type book with cocktails. And then I was getting bloated and a little bit chubby and inflamed, and drinking too much and enjoying life in the not in the right way, so to speak, because I owned a nightclub in King's Cross at the time. So I was living quite I guess a bit of a rock star lifestyle as a chef, owning a nightclub in King's Cross and having famous restaurants and releasing books. So I wasn't really taking care of myself, and I went through a breakup, not only of business but also of with my partner, who I had 2 children with at the time. And then when I met my current wife, Nicola, she was reading a book called Primal Body, Primal Mind by a woman called Nora Gagaudis, who's a dear friend of ours, and it was about the paleo diet, paleo ketogenic lifestyle. And she said, you might like reading this. So I read the book, and it really resonated with me. And so I implemented those changes, stopped drinking alcohol, stopped partying as much, or pretty much completely, and took a deep dive into what food could actually mean for people, apart from just something that is cooked and consumed and delicious. And so, which I thought was really fascinating being a chef, because I never really thought about nutrition too much up until that point. And this is going back probably 14 years ago from now. And reading that book, it just made so much sense. So I took a really deep dive into it, and started interviewing people about what paleo, ancestral diets, ketogenic diets, what are the benefits of this? And lo and behold, I adopted it, lost my inflammation, lost my 3 chins and my bloated belly, and skin cleared up, eyes cleared up, vitality soared through the roof. It was just a wonderful experience. And so I looked at the position I was in, hosting a #1 TV show, already having a great profile to be able to share recipes. And I thought, well, this seems like the right path to go down for me, because at the time when I looked at the paleo and ketogenic books that were being released throughout the world, they were being released by the doctors and the researchers and the scientists and the home cooks. And even though the recipes were okay, they didn't have the chef feel to them or the chef flavor or the pizzazz to them. And I thought, oh, here's a great opportunity to be able to turn this this philosophy into something really, really delicious using the skills that I'd accumulated over the last 20 plus years. So that led on to creating pretty much the last 15, 20 books that I released, which was on healthy eating under the guise of, or the definition of, a paleo-ketogenic style approach, or ancestral approach, if that's a better terminology for people to digest. And they became bestsellers. Like, they eclipsed the previous books that were just my chef style books that weren't focused on human nutrition. We sold so many books. The first book sold 100,000 copies, and a really good book that a chef released, a good selling book by a chef, would be 10,000 copies. And then my book sold about 100,000 copies. And it sort of raised some alarm bells out there. And the alarm bells were definitely rung through the mainstream media and through the Dietitians Association and the Medical Association that is out there, the pharmaceutical industry as well, because I started sharing thousands upon thousands of stories of people getting off their medications or reducing their medications and putting their autoimmune disease into remission, reversing type 2 diabetes, children changing the behavior that were on the autism spectrum, becoming more communicative, less seizures, and the list goes on and on and on and on. And that's coincided with me releasing a podcast, interviewing doctors from all around the world that were using ketogenic to help people with cancer, help people with dementia, Alzheimer's, mental health issues, and again, those other chronic illnesses that I discussed. So when that started to happen, that's when the sort of pendulum shifted for me, as the boy next door hosting a TV show to somebody with dangerous information out there that needs to be shut up very quickly and ridiculed. And let's create a campaign basically to make sure that the general public doubts what this person is sharing. And that was a fascinating thing to be able to witness from the seat of being in the mainstream media at the same time. And I guess the network was probably caught between a rock and a hard place, because the DNA of My Kitchen Rules at the time, it was Manu and myself co-hosting the #1 show in Australia, and then all of a sudden getting attacked, the media, not so much Channel 7 attacking, but definitely the other news stations attacking one of its co-hosts of the #1 TV show. And then, that just continued up until COVID, and then it got ramped up even more. But I wouldn't change a thing. It's definitely been quite an adventure that I've had the ability to experience and also to grow and learn from.
Yeah, no doubt about it. You mentioned the COVID. COVID hits. Now, I'll give you the floor here. Your initial impressions when you see, did it just something go off in your mind to go, hang on, just talked about the keto experience and how that can help people. Hang on, this thing's roll out. We're shutting down the world. If you're a Victorian, you barely got out of your house for 2 years, but professional sport can still keep playing and crossing borders. Were there enough red flags go off in your mind to say, hang on, what's this? And you've been attacked more than anyone, but you've just stayed true. You talk about that courage, that confidence to speak in front of 1,000 people. Did you draw on that in this time? Because I assume it would have been, apart from immediate family, quite lonely.
Oh, definitely not lonely. That's for sure. I mean, I have wonderful support from my family, and I'm at that point. I've been in that point in my life where I don't really give a fuck what anybody thinks about me.
Yeah.
It's whether I had the support of my family or not wouldn't have probably made any difference to me, because I do what I feel is right for me first and foremost all the time. And that might sound like a selfish thing, but I trust in my journey and how other people relate to that or judge that. That's their issue. It's not my issue. And when COVID came along, it definitely stank. Like an off fish in a bin that it's been out in the sun for too long. it stank as soon as it pretty much appeared. And I remember, putting out memes and posts basically just saying, this is a hoax, this is a scam, don't fall for it. Like, this is the biggest hoax. That's apart from the dietary guidelines, that's the other biggest scam that's ever been perpetrated on the Western population. But this was just a juiced up version of faulty information. And we saw it play out. The whole social distancing thing was a scam. It was a fairy tale, made up nonsense. Wearing masks, as we know now, made up nonsense. Again, fairy tale, like just complete and utter bullshit. And even before the vaccines were rolled out, or the shots, if you want to call them that, there was not one health official talking about, how to be healthy. And most of the health officials do not look healthy themselves. So there were so many red flags and holes in the story that, if you really contemplated and thought about it, there is no way that you could possibly ever think that story was what they were saying, and definitely nothing to be feared of. That is for sure. And we know now. I said when I was being interviewed by Liz Hayes during the 60 Minutes interview, if anybody saw that, she asked me about the pandemic, and she said, "Do you think it's a pandemic?" I said, "Well, time will tell." I do not think it was a pandemic. I would never put that definition over what COVID was. And I said that back then. And I think the evidence is well and truly out now that it wasn't a pandemic. And, who knows what it is and what it was for. Everybody can have their own beliefs or ideas on this, but it definitely wasn't something that I was going to abide by, because deep down it's like going along with a lie, and there's something that would have created dis-ease in myself if I went along with a lie that I did not believe in, just to toe the line. Just like, fuck that. That's, and if other people did that, I don't judge anybody for how they chose to react to that. Like, I believe in free will for everyone, and I would never put anyone down for what they believe in and the actions that they took. But, I have to trust in my own choices, and those choices were just, I wasn't going to social distance. I wasn't going to wear a mask. I definitely wasn't going to take a shot. And I definitely wasn't going to be fearful of something that I had no reason to be fearful of. That is for sure.
Yeah, and it appears pretty well organised, doesn't it? Because Fauci comes out and says, I effectively made up social distancing, and Meta has effectively come out in US Congress and admitted that they censored people and they were pressured by the government, yet we haven't heard that here, but that's clearly happened in America, and we're America's little cousin. So your thoughts are shared by many and probably despised by many too, but that's part of the system. But we talk about missing the disinformation stuff. You were deplatformed by Meta, weren't you? And then also fined by the TGA $80,000. But, do you remember what those breaches were for, and how do they stack up now in hindsight, if they were looking at it?
Yeah, it's a great question, because every newspaper article, they always say that I was deplatformed for misinformation and disinformation through COVID. And yet not one journalist has ever asked Meta what were the posts that were misinformation or disinformation. And I haven't been able to get that information. And you would think if you were a journalist reporting a story about Chef Pete Evans spreading misinformation and disinformation, you would think the first thing that they would get was the facts. Like, tell us which post or posts Pete had shared that got him deplatformed. And that has not come to light yet, nor do I think it will ever come out, because I do not think I shared a post that was misleading in any way, shape or form, or dishonest in any way, shape or form, to the best of my ability that I know. So, it's, I don't need to be right on this, even though I know I am right on this. But it is what it is. I'm grateful for it, because even now I'm about to go to the United States and be interviewed on some pretty major shows over there. And I was just on Newsmax a couple of days ago, and OAN News the other day. And yeah, there's some big people that are going to have me on their platform, and it's great. I send them an email and I write, cancelled Chef Pete Evans. I got blocked and deplatformed, and would you like to interview me now? And it always works out in your favor if you're telling the truth, I believe. So, I'm grateful for the experience. I got to see what it was like to have 2 million followers and then have basically none. I got to experience what it was like to be cancelled, losing about 15 business partnerships in the space of 24 hours, and having a secure income to having basically nothing in the space of 24 hours, and how I could adapt to that, and whether I would go into a state of fear or panic or become the victim and blame others, or whether I could use the experiences that I'd accumulated over my life to trust, accept, surrender, love unconditionally, and have full belief that this is the path that I've chosen to create for myself, or co-manifested with others for myself and for others as well. So, I'm always grateful for these experiences, because life would be pretty boring if every day was the same, probably. And, and I've definitely had quite a colourful experience over the last, give or take, decade or so, since talking about dietary principles, and also speaking out during COVID, and being a supporter of Trump and Bobby Kennedy Jr. And who knows what's around the corner, but we just put one foot in front of the other and do our best to stay in balance.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. You talk about that cancelled one was the black sun symbol that you posted. Do you remember what reason why you posted it at the time, or did you understand it, or what were you thinking, and what did it mean to you at the time?
Yeah, I saw the caterpillar. It was a caterpillar wearing a MAGA hat. And I've got a MAGA hat, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then it was transformed into a butterfly. And I thought, well, that's a pretty cool symbology, going through a transformation into, I guess, a creature of flight, going from a caterpillar to a butterfly. I think it's just like the dragonfly metamorphosis as well. I think there's something so profound about those creatures that go through this massive physical transformation, spiritual transformation, if you like. And so that's what I saw with that meme. I saw the caterpillar with the red hat going into the flight of the butterfly. I promise you, and promise everybody, I had no idea there was the black sun. Like, I didn't even notice it when I shared it. And it's one of those things that if I had have known it, I definitely would have shared it, even though through my own education, I interviewed a fella for the second time on my podcast who is very deeply into symbology.
Yeah.
Different symbols that have been used throughout time. And that black sun image, even though it is touted as a neo-Nazi image, from my understanding, it was only used once on the floor of one senior person in the Nazi regime. I don't know the name, Mike. I haven't fucking investigated because it doesn't really interest me.
Yeah.
But when I interviewed this fella about symbology, if that's the correct terminology, symbology?
Symbolism.
Symbolism, yeah. He talked to me about where that black sun image originated from, and it had nothing to do with Nazism or anything like that. It was used for thousands and thousands of years, and there's quite a beautiful, I guess, definition or meaning behind that sun at the time, prior to this dude using it on his floor in the Nazi party. So no, I had no idea, and that is the honest truth. But wow, it's amazing how quickly that became the straw that broke the camel's back for Pete Evans on being deplatformed and cancelled. Like, that's the one.
Yeah.
Like, like that's the thing that took me out. Like it's quite a bizarre thing because all of my work as a chef has been about celebrating different cultures and cuisines from around the world. Like I celebrate Jewish cuisine in a lot of my books. I've cooked with Jewish people on the TV shows. I celebrate Indigenous cultures. So the idea that I would be a white supremacist neo-Nazi, like hiding underneath all of these recipes and cookbooks and documentaries I've made, like it's beyond ridiculous that was the thing that took me out. I would think that, it would be me talking about COVID that would have got me cancelled, or talking about saturated fat that would have got me cancelled, or, in the ability to help children with autism with diet would have been the thing that taken me out, or vaccines would have been the thing that got me cancelled. But the truth is stranger than fiction, that the thing that took me out to be cancelled was the most ridiculous possible thing that anyone would ever think. If anybody knows me, they know that I am not racist or a neo-Nazi in any way, shape or form, nor will I ever be. And I never say never, but I will say never about this topic, because the thing that I truly hold dear is our individuality. And the last thing I would ever want is homogeny of the human species. Like, the more biodiverse from our political persuasions or ideologies, our religious ideologies, our cultural ideologies, and our heritage from all across the planet, that is something that I hold dearer than pretty much anything, as one of my deep-seated beliefs that I think we need to, and I don't say need very often, but we need to protect, is the idea for self-expression of our individuality. And I guess I haven't studied Nazism or neo-Nazism or white supremacists because it doesn't interest me. But the last thing I would ever want to do is homogenize or segregate anybody to behaving a certain way or believing a certain thing, except for biodiversity and authenticity and uniqueness. Yeah. So it was so comical that I'm sort of grateful that it happened as well, because it is so ludicrous, an idea that I would ever be a neo-Nazi. Like, it's so fucking bizarre even talking about it with you and others, and it's fucking bizarre that it keeps getting brought up in interviews, to be honest with you. It's just like, oh, really?
Yeah.
Like, I have to.
Well, it sounds like it was an excuse to pull the trigger, wasn't it?
I 100% believe that was an excuse to pull the trigger for it. It seems to be, well, I've been watching the political stage in the United States for quite some time. And, I've seen Trump being labeled this. I've seen other people around him being labeled as a racist and a white supremacist or a sympathizer, or these types of things. So I just never thought it would happen to me. Like, I didn't think I was big enough for that to happen to, that they would use that sort of the lowest hanging fruit on the tree, which is racism, to cancel someone like myself. It's like, have you really thought this through? Because it's very easily rebutted. Again, going back to every cookbook and documentary and TV show that I make, it's like, I'm not cooking just with, I don't even know if country neo-Nazis or white supremacists are, but it's, I'm grateful that it happened, to be honest, but I'm also astounded that was the way, but I understand the game that is being played. The racist card seems to be played to silence somebody without any recourse from the person that is being silenced.
Yeah, and that's not just racism, it's everything, isn't it? Anyone who steps outside the chain can cop their whack if you become a problem to the narrative. I certainly know that too well. You touch on that politics. I I know you've had a bit to do with RFK Jr. Just trying to make America healthy again. You're massive on health. They've already banned red dye in the foods, investigations in the vaccine schedules. We've touched about that. Where do you hope it lands?
I don't like to use the word hope too much because, hope is always waiting for something to happen.
Where will it land?
I like, to be honest with you, I won't say it's irrelevant because I think it is vitally important that this information is brought to the surface. And then obviously it'll be rebutted and debated and, there's science, as we know, there's corrupted science and pretty much there's science out there to support everything.
Yeah.
It's of all the paradoxes that are out there or all the dietary beliefs. There's scientific evidence to support the dietary guidelines. There's for carnivore, for veganism, for plant-based, for vegetarianism, for paleo, for keto, for not adhering to anything and just eating whatever you want. There's evidence. You can find evidence for everything. So I think this could be a long-winded journey for this information to come out, and then it obviously will be fought against, blah, 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 So where I like to reside is individuals have the ability to choose what they want to put into their mouth, put onto their skin, brush their teeth with if they so desire, and choose the life that they wish to live right now. So I respect everybody that is going on the fight to get the dyes out and get fluoride out of the water and to stop people using glyphosate and Roundup and all of these toxic chemicals on our food. I think it's great. And one thing is every single individual on the planet has their own trajectory or their journey or their adventure. Some people love going into bat and doing those types of things, going into court and bringing up the evidence and saying, this is that, and I respect that. I celebrate that. That's not me. There's other people that don't care about anything like that and it won't affect their world in the slightest, right? So I sort of sit between the two of those, whereas I do believe it's important, but at the same time, I also believe that we don't need things to change through government bureaucracies for us to be able to eat healthily now, to choose what we put onto our bodies or into our bodies right now. There's toxic sunscreens out there. There's healthier sunscreens, or we don't use any sunscreens. Up to you, depending on your choices. There's foods with additives out there at the moment, and pesticides added and dyes added. And at the same time, there is beautiful organic and holistically raised animals that haven't been given growth hormones or antibiotics or vaccines. And there's fruit and vegetables we can buy that have been sprayed. And there's ones that haven't been. We're allowed to grow our own fruit and vegetables and herbs at home, or we can buy it from the supermarket, or we can go to the organic grocery store. There are water filtering devices that are out there to remove the fluoride from our water. Or if people believe that fluoride in their water is good for them and chlorine in the water is good for them, then that's available to them at the same time. So I like to reside, this is me personally, and everybody's different. I understand that. I respect that, if you choose to be healthy, the solutions and the options are there for you now. If you don't care about anything to be healthy, then those options are available to you too. And I wish you well on your adventure, just like I wish everybody well on their adventure, no matter how they choose to live their lives. But I also think it's going to be an exciting time over the coming years with Bobby Kennedy. I view it as the best way I can describe it is I have preferences in this world, things that I like, things that I dislike. And I like watching the chessboard as such, the geopolitical chessboard, the political chessboard, the people in these positions of assumed power, and watching the moves that they make on the chessboard with my own preferences and likes, but not attached to any particular outcome. Because, again, that means you live in hope and expectation. that something will change for you to have a better life, whereas you can have the best life you choose right now at any point in time, if you like.
Yeah.
Or you can play the victim and blame everything for the position that you're in now. Like, or if only Bobby Kennedy could get the fluoride out of the water, I'd be happy. If only the vaccine schedule will be reduced, then I would be happy and validated for my concerns or for my injured child, and everything would make sense then. And I understand that. I understand there's so many people out there that are hurt and suffering from the choices that have been either pushed upon them, like a childhood vaccine schedule, and some children and families have been traumatized with tragedy, whether losing their young ones or having, side effects from these pharmaceutical companies when they thought they were doing the right thing and just doing the right thing by their child. And so I understand there's people that want answers. There's people that want justice out there. And, hopefully, I've used the word hopefully, that I don't like to use the word, but, time will tell what eventuates from what has been set in motion over the last 4 or 5 years, or previously with Bobby Kennedy being in there now. If there's a person that can bring light to all of this, it's definitely him. And I look forward to watching the show play out.
Yeah, you speak of the show, no bigger show in the world than Donald Trump, whether you like him or hate him. Personally, I like what I see, and we can only judge by what we see, the changes he's trying to make. Do you see some of those potential changes of currency and cutting all the fat of government bureaucracy and money wastage and trying to minimise tax? Do you ever dream that we could follow suit?
Oh, that's a big question. Dreaming if we will follow suit. I reckon they're going to do a bloody good job of it over there. I reckon they're going to give it a red hot nudge, and they're doing that right now. So what will the ripple effects be through different parts of the world if America does this? I've been watching El Salvador since President Bukele took on Bitcoin four or so years ago, and watching the implications of that small country. And I have a feeling that is going to have a ripple effect throughout the world as well. Again, I don't hold any timeline expectations, because that's just a surefire way of being frustrated and disappointed. It's just I used to hold these expectations about when things would happen, and it can be a very disappointing and frustrating thing to go through. So now I've learned to let go of setting those types of expectations on timelines for myself, or what I think should happen. Should is a very weasel word that I choose not to use very often. And but yeah, the United States is such a unique territory, that's for sure, and what it stands for with its constitution. So I've often said this about Trump, is that, he's definitely a catalyst for change. And who knows what will happen after these 4 years, what this disruptive energy and the ripple effects that will happen from this will be. I mean, will Bobby Kennedy be the next president for 2028 onwards for 8 years? I mean, I've seen the potential of that play out. It could happen. What would that mean? I don't know enough about the geopolitical playing field to understand the intricacies of what's playing out. I mean, I'm watching today what's going on with Zelensky after he visited Trump yesterday or the day before, and the ripple effect of that right now, with Australia jumping on board to support Ukraine and the United Kingdom and different European nations. Like, wow, like, who knows what is going to happen over the next day, week, months to come. Like, it's pretty compelling. It's compelling viewing, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And like any good story, you don't want to get to the end before you go through the journey. I know people that when they get a new book, they go to the back page to read how it ends. I would never do that. I want to be in there for all the twists and turns and the surprises and the mysteries and the rug pulls that are there. And whether I've co-manifested this, so it is a great show for me to watch for the remainder of my years, whether I'm still around in 50, 60, 70 years, that's my intention. And perhaps it'll just keep playing out like this for the next 50, 60, 70 years. And I wouldn't have an issue with this because I find it entertaining, and I find it thrilling. I find it comedic. I find it horrifying. I go through all the human emotions watching everything play out, but still wish to stay in a grounded, balanced, harmonious state, watching, observing, but not getting too caught up in it, but just being the observer. But it does bring up emotions from time to time. Like I get excited, I'm like, wow, look what's happening today. And like next day I'm like, ooh, fuck, this could turn a corner very quickly. And then the next day it's like, ooh, isn't that funny that came through? So I'm enjoying everything at the moment, and not to say that there's not suffering and tragedy in the world, like there pretty much always has been, and perhaps there always will be. Perhaps that's part of the human experience, that there is suffering and pain and tragedy, whether on a large scale like war or whether on an individual level like we started this conversation off with, relationship breakdowns and diagnoses and illness and pain and suffering through chronic illness, But at the same time, there's also great joy and celebration to be had. And I think it comes down to, what we choose to focus on and where we choose to put our energy. Because I could definitely look at things all day long and be in a state of despair and disappointment and sadness and anguish. 100%, there's enough of that in the world to keep me going for the rest of my life, to see the horrific nature of humanity. But at the same time, I could also focus my attention on the beauty of humanity. And that could keep me going for the rest of my life too, if I pick the things that brought me complete and utter joy, and see the unconditional love that is played out there during war, during these hardships, during these painful experiences, during this suffering. We've seen people come together during COVID in such a beautiful way. Yet at the same time, we've seen people come together in quite a nefarious way as well, dobbing in the neighbor if they weren't wearing a mask. We've seen both sides of the coin. What are we going to focus on? Do we shut one out just to focus on the other? Do we just focus on the good, everything's light and love, and not look at the sort of the pain and the suffering? Or do we take it all in a way where it doesn't take us out of our center so that we do not suffer our own dis-ease on our adventure? And that's where I like to believe that I reside. Watch from a neutral point of view, stay in balance and harmony, have as much joy and celebration and passion in my life, but not to disregard all the tragedy and pain and suffering that's also out there in the world, and keep moving forward to offer solutions. And I guess my expertise is offering nutritious, delicious food that hopefully people can incorporate into their, hopefully, see, I use that word again. It's the invitation for people to look at the food and the recipes that I share and perhaps incorporate that into their day-to-day life. So perhaps one aspect of their life where there could be pain and suffering, which is chronic illness, could be alleviated or prevented. And, that's a worthwhile thing to continue doing for myself at this particular point in time. That's what I feel invited to continue to do, and I don't think it harms anyone along the way.
Normally, to finish, you ask for a key message, but society's probably as divided as we've seen, at the moment. With, you look at the vax issues, it's one or the other, and Trump and it's not, and it's Biden or it's Albanese and it's independents or it's liberals or whoever. But is the key to bringing everyone together for their own just to go on their own journey? Or is it just simply being kinder?
Oh, it's definitely been kinder for sure, and allowing people to go on their own journeys. I never have the belief that we all have to join hands and sing Kumbaya together or whatever it may be, because that's imposing a belief on others, you know. Another way of looking at it is I've got my hand out there if anybody would like to attach themselves on the journey with me, if you like, whether it be physical or just metaphorical.
Yeah.
If you want to come along on a great, delicious journey of eating some great food, I will share recipes on my Instagram page every day. And, if you choose to hold my hand on that journey or be a part of that community, sweet. If you don't, sweet. I'm not going to dislike you because you don't want to eat that type of food. I'm not going to dislike you because you like Biden or Harris or one of the Australian politicians. I don't follow Australian politics at all. I find it fucking childish. And fuck, it's like give us some serious intellectual, intelligent people on stage with charisma that are authentic. Then I might take interest. But watching the clowns that are up there now, and I don't use the word clown lightly, and I very rarely use it, but it looks like kindergarten compared to most of the political systems in the world look like children at kindergarten. America seems like at the moment it's sort of like maybe high school. Perhaps we'll get to that point in the future where we don't need these politicians and governments as much as we believe we currently do at the moment, and they will be less important as the years go on. And I do believe that will happen over time. Will it happen in my lifetime? Probably. We'll see the fanaticism of celebrities and prominent people in politics wane. I think it's inevitable. I don't know whether I answered that question properly or not, but
you answered it perfectly.
That's all I got. There was something else I was going to say.
We've got about a minute left, but you're a fan of Bitcoin. You're a fan of cryptocurrency. Do you think it's a way forward?
Well, I'm a fan of Bitcoin. I wouldn't say I'm a fan of cryptocurrency because there are a lot of cryptocurrencies. There's only one Bitcoin, and there's a distinct separation between the two. Bitcoin is cryptocurrency, but not all cryptocurrency is Bitcoin. And if anybody is confused by that, there's a book over my left shoulder called The Bitcoin Standard, which is really too bright for anybody to see, but I would encourage people to have a read or listen to the audio book of that. It's a fascinating education on the history of what money means. And I've been fascinated about Bitcoin for 5 years. I'm speaking at the Bitcoin conference this Sunday, and then I've just been invited to speak at Bitcoin Las Vegas in May, which is a huge conference, and also Bitcoin Prague in June. I'm going to be there speaking about health and Bitcoin because the parallels run hand in hand. If we want sovereignty over our wealth and we want sovereignty over our health, I think that the two run in parallel. Decentralized health, decentralized finance. If you want to step out of the medical system, the pharmaceutical system, the big agricultural system, the solution is there, and then they will lose a customer. If every person in Australia decided to eat the way that I promote and others promote, the pharmaceutical industry and the medical industries would change within the space of a year. And the political lobbying behind that would also change. And if people studied Bitcoin and understand what Bitcoin meant for them on so many different layers, then the financial system and the central banks and the Federal Reserves, it would change within the space of a year too. And pretty much, I won't say all our problems would be gone, but a huge chunk of what is driving today's major problems would disappear. I firmly believe that. So, study up on Bitcoin, and if you choose to, it's fascinating. It's been one of the biggest eye openers for me over the last 5 years, and I've probably spent thousands and thousands of hours studying it, and I still have a lot more research to do in all the ways that it can benefit humanity and in the individual as well.
Appreciate your time today, Pete. You're a busy man, and if anyone's interested, you're on Instagram, Chef Pete Evans, and I assume you've got a website and other ways people can contact you?
Yeah, I've got a website that probably needs some uploading and fixing. It hasn't been touched for years. But yeah, tune in on Instagram. I just joined X as well. And the juicy stuff's on Telegram if you want to follow me on Telegram. So yeah, Telegram's for the news, the geopolitical sort of the worldview. Instagram's more for food. And X, I'm still getting used to it. I only joined it a couple of months ago, and yeah, still getting my head wrapped around how best to use that platform. But you know, I'm excited about the adventure. But thanks for having me on, and for everybody listening or watching, please, anything that I've said doesn't resonate, please let it go. If it has resonated, let it flow. And these are just my personal beliefs, and I firmly believe in free will for everyone, and I would never want anybody to believe or behave the way that I do, and unless you come to it through your own adventure. So yeah, thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure, mate, and love you all too, everyone that's listening. So thank you.
Thanks for your time, Pete. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you liked it, and hey, we'd love to hear from you too, so drop us a comment. Stay tuned for the next episode of The Ballsy Show.